Welcome everyone to the Region 1 Insights webinar series. I'm Nancy Patterson with NNLM Region 1, and today we're bringing you Elder Justice Explained, what it is and how you can help. We are so grateful to have expert speakers from the Elder Justice Coalition with us today to present on this important topic. They'll be covering everything from the roots and impact of the elder justice movement to related federal policies and ways that you can advocate for the well-being of elders in your community or nationally. Please feel free to enter questions or comments as they occur to you in the chat, and there will be pauses where questions are taken during the webinar and also at the end as time permits. With that, it is a pleasure to introduce Bob Blancato and Meredith Whitmire, our presenters today. Bob Blancato is the national coordinator of the bipartisan 3,000-member Elder Justice Coalition. He's the president of Matz Blancato and Associates, located in Washington, D.C., and he's long been recognized as a national advocate with policy expertise on behalf of older adults. In 2019, he was invited by both the Senate Finance Committee and House Ways and Means Committee to testify on a range of issues, including elder justice. Bob holds a BA from Georgetown University and an MPA from American University, and he's won numerous awards for advocacy, most recently the American Society for Aging's Hall of Fame Award in March 2020. Meredith Whitmire is the policy director of the Elder Justice Coalition. She is also the vice president of Matz Blancato and Associates and the policy and advocacy director for the National Association of Nutrition and Aging Services Programs. In these roles, she provides policy analysis and direction for and advocates on behalf of a wide variety of aging topics, including nutrition, elder justice, and community-based services. She holds a JD from Georgetown University Law Center and a BA from Georgetown University. Thank you so much for being with us today, Bob and Meredith. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much for having us today. And thank you for all of you participants and panelists for your interest in this topic. We'd like to thank the NNLM and Nancy in particular for reaching out. We're going to go through some elder abuse statistics, signs of elder abuse, and elder justice policy today, just to make sure everyone has a good grasp on all of the above. So Bob and I are from the Elder Justice Coalition. Bob founded the Elder Justice Coalition. It's 19 years old this year. So it was formed in 2003 to support the original Elder Justice Act. We are federal policy oriented, 3,000 members from national, state, and local organizations, also individuals. So we focus on Congress and the administration in particular. So what is elder abuse? This is kind of a lengthy definition, but beyond physical, sexual, or psychological abuse, there's also neglect, abandonment, and financial exploitation. And basically, this is occurring when a person of trust to an older person is violating that trust. It can happen in the community setting. It can happen in facilities. It's very prevalent. We'll go through the statistics in a moment. The two most prevalent kinds are financial exploitation and fraud in general, and self-neglect, which might not sound like an external abuse problem, but typically self-neglect comes about as the result of neglect or abandonment. So that is something that folks at Adult Protective Services, et cetera, do address. So the average victim of elder abuse is an older woman living alone between the ages of 75 and 80. And today, almost half of women over 75 live alone. So you can imagine there's a lot of risk there. Some other risk factors and things that might make it more likely that someone would be a victim of elder abuse If you're living with family members other than a spouse, so if you're living with your children or grandchildren, they might be the perpetrators. Someone who has a disability, poor health, someone who has dementia, they are particularly vulnerable. I believe some estimates have it as high as 50% of all folks with dementia end up being the victims of elder abuse, which is horrifying. Um, Lower income or being a minority, those tend to be slightly higher reported categories as well. So, those are also things that might put someone at risk. So this is a huge problem. The Justice Department says that 1 in 10 older adults are victims of elder abuse. We also know that victims of financial elder abuse lose at least $3 billion a year. There are other reports and calculations that suggest in the tens of billions or higher. Um, Much abuse and neglect occurs in community settings because that is where most older adults are. But there's still a really pervasive issue of abuse and neglect in nursing home settings, rehab settings, basically, anywhere that older adults who are vulnerable are living. And what's really interesting, abuse in nursing homes is that is on the rise, even as the number of older adults in nursing homes are declining. So that's very troubling, and we're very concerned about that as well. Um, as far as financial abuse goes, people over 60 made up the majority of U.S. cybercrime victims in 2019 and accounted for the most losses. In 2020, older adults lost at least $602 million to fraud, scams, and financial exploitation schemes. And I would note that is just the reported figure. That does not include folks who are too embarrassed to come forward, people who think, oh, well, there's nothing people could do for me anyway. So that at least I think is important there. And older adults lost at least $100 million to COVID-19 related fraud alone. So a lot of those scams would be things like contact tracing. Some random phone number texts you and says that you've been exposed. Please give your name and address and personal information so that we can contact other people on your behalf. Um, People have been scammed as far as test kits go, getting test kits that don't work or not getting them at all. People have been scammed in the vaccine distribution space and miracle cures. That just in general, there've been a lot of issues that older adults have faced with COVID. So the consequences of elder abuse, it's something that is just as devastating as you would think. Many victims suffer physical injuries. Victims may have problems with trust, so that would be an emotional effect. Be wary of others. Or victims may lose, a lot of money, their life savings maybe, to scammers. So, there's a lot of concerns here, and the consequences are pretty severe. Just wanted to point out that elder abuse affects people from all walks of life, even celebrities. Some of these are older examples, but there's plenty of breaking stories as is. Brooke Astor and Mickey Rooney, who was actually, I would say, partially responsible for getting the Elder Justice Act passed. Also, Stan Lee, who his business manager has been charged with fiduciary elder abuse and false imprisonment. There are countless examples of people who have been taken advantage of or harmed. If you suspect any kind of elder abuse, this is just on a, personal, professional note. Please, if someone is in imminent danger, call 911 or the local police. If the danger is not imminent, if they're not, if you're not personally seeing elder abuse, like happening right now, you can report your concerns to the local Adult Protective Services agency. And if you suspect abuse of someone living in a nursing home in particular, you should contact your local long-term care ombudsman. So that just to head off any questions on what to do there, because we do get a lot of those. So there's been some federal response efforts to date. Uh, in 1974, the Social Security Act gave permission for states to use social services block grant funding for adult protective services as well as child protective services. That gave permission part is pretty important because not all states do end up using that funding for adult protective services, meaning that APS has been very underfunded. Long-term care ombudsmen were created through federal, it was also created through federal effort in the Older Americans Act. And I see Rebecca just put a link in the chat, which is excellent. Thank you. And then finally, the Elder Justice Act passed. It was first introduced in 2003. So this is, again, the legislation that our coalition was formed to advocate on behalf of originally. We've since expanded, but it grew out of a Senate investigation that revealed that under 2% of federal funding was spent on elder abuse overall. That would include 0.1% of NIA funding. So, studies were not being conducted on the issue of elder abuse. Tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of CDC funding. And interestingly, also a very small 0.5% of the budget of the Office of Violence Against Women, even though elder abuse is a particularly important issue for women in particular. So there's, pre-Elder Justice Act, there hadn't been any dedicated funding for adult protective services. There were no forensic centers to study and help better detect and report elder abuse. Long-term care ombudsmen not getting enough training, not getting the support they need. And prior to the Elder Justice Act, quite a few people with criminal records getting employed in nursing homes, and criminal records in particular that would evidence harm against vulnerable people. So, not just your average criminal record. So it's important to note that the Elder Justice Act has been bipartisan from the outset. It's always been pretty modest in scope and helping the most vulnerable older adults. Its enactment in 2010 as part of the Affordable Care Act marked an important policy threshold. And it represented the strongest federal commitment to fighting elder abuse in history. So before that, no really substantial legislation on this front was passed. It recognized the importance of APS and the long-term care ombudsman and directed most of its resources to bolstering those two frontline programs. However, there's always a but. Funding for the Elder Justice Act for about the first 10 years of its existence was a struggle. Many reasons. Because it was part of the Affordable Care Act, it automatically became a political hot potato. And it was discretionary funding, meaning that, Congress said they authorized the money. They said they could spend money on elder justice, but they never mandated that funding to be spent. So, appropriators could do what they wanted to, and they were not interested in funding this legislation, partially because it was a new funding need, and it was coming before committees with limited knowledge of this issue. And frankly, the lack of data was a huge problem. As Bob and I usually say, data drives dollars. And without having data to, really get to the bottom of who is being abused, how many people are being abused, et cetera, having reliable data from and unified data from Adult Protective Services, all of that, it's hard to get Congress to move on something if they don't have that background information to start with. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bob to talk about what happened after 2020.
Okay, thank you, Meredith. And I want to also thank the National Library of Medicine and Nancy Patterson in particular for having us on here today. I guess I will ask before I move to my part if there are any questions that popped up that we need to address.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't paused.
Yeah, can we take a look and see? And if we're happy to do that.
Bob and Meredith, there were no questions thus far, at least not that were sent to everyone.
Okay, well, as we said earlier, we encourage people to do it as they see something that comes to their mind. But I'm going to talk to you about some positive developments that occurred pretty much in the past year plus, beginning back in December of 2020. For context purposes, as Meredith mentioned, when members of Congress began to hear back home about these COVID-related scams that were popping up, particularly around the vaccines when they were first made available, that triggered a very interesting response on the part of two key members of Congress, Senator Wyden of Oregon and Chairman Richard Neal of the Ways and Means Committee. They knew there was an existing Elder Justice Act on the books. They knew there was funding for entities like Adult Protective Services, but they needed to address those issues in the context of a COVID relief package. So in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of December 2020, there was $100 million provided for the Elder Justice Act, an unprecedented amount of money that this act received. And it had to be spent on addressing particularly the COVID-related scams. But, when it all began to proliferate in the community and in the nursing homes, a lot of attention was focused on it. So we were waiting to move to the new administration and the next bill being the American Rescue Plan. As people remember, December of 2020 marked the end of the Trump presidency and the Republican majority in the Senate. And everybody knew that it was going to be a larger emergency relief package coming called the American Rescue Plan. And once again, on top of the $100 million provided in December, again, led by Chairman Neal and Chairman Wyden, additional funding of $88 million for elder justice programs was provided, and $188 million going into the fiscal year that we're currently in. But $100 million had to be dedicated to Adult Protective Services for them to do their work in investigating and trying to prevent elder abuse. So if you look at this slide, you can see how dramatic developments happened since December of 2020. Up until that point, over about 11-year period, the Elder Justice Act got about $58 million in funding. And within several months, it achieved almost $400 million in federal funding. And again, the pandemic did contribute to the urgency of this funding. So then we have a second piece of activity that is we're working on right now, is to renew the Elder Justice Act. Laws are passed for periods of time and they need to be reauthorized and renewed. And again, led by Chairman Neal and Chairman Wyden, they have put together a Elder Justice Reauthorization and Modernization Act, which if in fact were to be approved by the Senate, as the House already did, it would dedicate $4.2 billion to reauthorize the existing Elder Justice Act, funding for Adult Protective Services, funding for long-term care ombudsman, but adding three important new and relevant areas in the elder justice space. One, dealing with social isolation. This is becoming a national tragedy, a public health emergency, frankly. And there is a direct connection between those who are socially isolated and those who are victims of elder abuse. As Meredith pointed out, the second highest form of abuse reported is self-neglect, which coincides with oftentimes with people who are isolated and alone. Medical legal partnerships, which were experimented with in a number of parts around the country. They were given new funding for in this bill, and also legal hotlines to report cases of elder abuse and other related things. But the third one is particularly important, and many people have been reading about the tragedies in our nursing homes since the pandemic. A lot of this relates to staffing, or understaffing, frankly, is probably the better way to look at it. It is time to put new incentives into getting people to become able to work in nursing homes with a livable wage for doing very important work. And so there are a number of incentives built into the Elder Justice Reauthorization Bill to do just that around nursing homes. So let's tell you kind of where it's at now. Okay, well, before I move to that, I want to mention that when you put things, doing advocacy as we do, sometimes we write articles for influential newspapers that members of Congress read, such as The Hill. And the point we were trying to make here is that if you took the entire Build Back Better package that passed the House, the $4.2 billion for elder justice represented 0.3% of the entire bill. But in our mind, it was an investment as compared to an expenditure, and it was capable of making a difference in preventing elder abuse in our country. So now where are we? Okay, this is you're all reading the papers, you kind of know where we are. We're stalled at the moment. The House included the full $4.2 billion in its Build Back Better bill, which passed in November. The Senate, when they began drafting their bill, included most of what was in the House bill around elder justice. But as you know, the bill has gone nowhere since before the holidays, in part because of opposition from Senator Manchin of West Virginia, who has stated his ability to not support the bill as presently developed. So we are looking at the following different potential outcomes. Okay? First of all, we do believe that elder justice will come out of this process in a way that we can build on for the future. It is possible that the pieces of the Build Back Better bill could be taken apart. A smaller bill could emerge. A bipartisan issue that helps older adults could likely survive a process like that. That's one of our jobs as advocates, to follow this process and be able to jump in wherever we need to if a new bill should emerge. But if we do, in fact, produce and fund a new elder justice infrastructure, which really is what this is all about, supporting old programs and endorsing new programs, that will be a very strong achievement, especially if we can finally establish in the minds of people in Congress there is a linkage between elder abuse and social isolation, because we're going to be committing more resources to addressing social isolation in the future, and we need to do so as well as with elder abuse. So, let's talk about some of the realities, because we have to deal in the reality world. Inadequate funding until recently has been a problem in the elder justice space. It's festered for decades, even though we have seen a steady increase in the number of older adults in our nation, the aging of America, as we call it, and especially among those 75 years and over, who are the most common victims of elder abuse. The lack of adequate education and training on aging issues, including dementia, for those working in elder abuse prevention, including and especially law enforcement, has been a problem. A bill was passed in the last Congress to improve the quality of materials that the Department of Justice would provide for those with dementia who might be also elder abuse victims. We also have a lack of understanding and support, including financial support, for alternatives to policing, such as multidisciplinary teams, which operate in many communities in this country, where you have your law enforcement, your healthcare people, your faith-based people, social work people, other people in the community coming together to build strategies on how to prevent elder abuse in their communities. And there is also, of course, a lack of understanding of other methods of resolution, such as restorative justice. And I know our colleagues in the Department of Justice are going to be doing a webinar on that in the near future, which we can provide information on. So since we did, this was also about what can you do and what must we do. and move this process forward, it's about intensifying the advocacy for more funding. It is a tragedy in our nation that we have an intergenerational cycle of abuse. But look at the history here. You have child abuse legislation passed in 1974 with $9 billion being committed to address that issue, which they should be doing, we should be doing. We have family and domestic violence funding starting in 1986, approaching $3 billion to address that serious issue. You've got the Violence Against Women Act of 1992, which has had $8 billion since its enactment, and it is also up for renewal in this year. But elder justice funding took till 2010 to get a law passed, and really till 2020 to get it funded the way it should be. So, it is a difficult picture in many ways, but it's one that we understand and deal with. So what we have to do is we need to support bills and all those related efforts that strike hardest at perpetrators. Let's remember that elder abuse is also a law and order issue. These are criminal activities. They need to be treated as criminal activities. We need to give law enforcement the tools they need to go and perpetrate. If you take someone's life savings from them and leave them penniless, you should be prosecuted, and there should be restitution for those people who lose through, I always tell the story because this happens, and I know these are real life stories. You take that statistic that Meredith gave, the average victim being an older woman between 75 and 80 living alone. Okay. Fancy yourself as that person for the moment. You've been home all day. You've had no contact with the outside world. At 4 o'clock, your phone rings. Who's on the other end of the phone? A scammer. The minute you say hello, you're in trouble, because they will use that opportunity to befriend and do what they can to get valuable information from you, which you may think is an innocent call, but at the end of the day, it could be very problematic for your savings or your assets. So we need to be really aggressive in reporting elder abuse and breaking up these scams. I mean, the previous administration did a really good job of coordinating efforts to round up scam artists. They would round them up 200 at a time around the country and prosecute them. That's what we have to do. We have to enhance our knowledge and improve the training of law enforcement so they know what this is all about, and prosecutors, frankly. Because when a case does go to court, it shouldn't be, poo-pooed as not being important. It's very important. But they need to have prosecutors who know how to deal with that. We need to support data collection that captures the specific impact of elder abuse on persons of color, including Indigenous people, LGBT people, and women. Our data collection is just starting to be improving, but it needs to be more consolidated and broken down into pieces so we have a better idea of what we're talking about. And then finally, we hope this as an introduction for many of you to our Elder Justice Coalition. We hope that you will stay involved with us. You can find us. We have a very simple way to find both Meredith and myself. You can find Meredith at elderjusticecoalition.com. You can find me at bob@elderjusticecoalition.com. And the resources you have there in front of you could give you some other information to follow up on what we covered today. So with that, we will stop and see if there are any comments, questions that folks have. And again, thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you, Bob and Meredith, and we'll wait for some questions to come into the chat. Douglas Jackson, while you were talking about the elder justice policies and funding being so far behind other important measures of protection against violence, he commented it's a cruel travesty, and it certainly is. We do have a question from Suzanne. She says, so what do you see as the impact of the current defund the police efforts will have on law enforcement support?
That's a good question. It can't be helpful. I think the importance of understanding law enforcement's role in elder abuse is important because it is an emerging role. It is not something that a lot of law enforcement have dealt with for a long period of time yet. In many communities, it's a growing problem. And, in this situation, you need the full auspices of law enforcement to prosecute individuals who are doing these heinous things to older adults. And so if you defund police and reduce their resources, probably one of the things that would suffer the most would be the fight against elder abuse, because it's probably one of the newer things that they're working on. So I think that, we have to put this thing in context. I think there is a growing concern about the practical impact of defunding police. I'm not going to argue the point that we shouldn't put more resources into issues like mental health and social services at the same time we're addressing police issues. But I think defunding the police would have a particularly difficult impact on efforts to combat elder abuse.
Thank you. And we have a question from Douglas. What is the age range to be considered elder abuse?
Well,
it varies depending on state law, federal law. There's some of the Department of Justice programs include people who are 50 and older, 55 and older. That's kind of an outlier. Usually we're talking about folks who are 60 and older or 65 and older. And, I guess also something else to mention is that Adult Protective Services also handles cases of younger adults with severe disabilities. So, any vulnerable adult kind of falls into the APS category as well.
Douglas, you bring up an interesting point, because we do have this sort of disparity of defining what an old
Yes.
person is in federal law. Older Americans Act and Elder Justice Act is 60. Early retirement and Social Security is 62. Medicare is 65. Retirement age, full retirement benefits for Social Security could either be 66 or 67. And you have one program where they can provide funding for older workers that's 55. That's considered an older worker. So at some point, maybe we should establish some consistency in the definition.
Yes, it's confusing, and also looking at county departments of aging or senior centers, you can participate at 50 in some, 60 at others, and it would be nice to have some consistency.
Right.
Suzanne has a follow-up question. Will part of the renewal of the act actively encourage education and training for DAs and law enforcement on elder abuse?
Well, not as directly as we might want, but there is an Elder Abuse Prosecution and Prevention and Prosecution Act that passed in a previous Congress that does in fact create new tools and vehicles to help law enforcement and prosecutors in this case. For example, in that law, they created two elder justice coordinators, one in the Department of Justice to oversee their activities at the federal level, which again go down to the state and local level as well, in terms of training and things of that nature. The other elder justice coordinator is in the Federal Trade Commission. But I will tell you that there are wonderful examples, and have been. Unfortunately, both of these individuals I'm going to cite have retired from their jobs. One is a gentleman named Paul Greenwood, who was in San Diego, who convinced his boss at the time that they needed a separate elder abuse prevention unit. He headed it up and did a fabulous job of prosecuting, educating around the country people about this problem, and help train prosecutors on what to do. He was a myth buster. One of the myths that he busted was the fact that an older adult is a bad witness, even if they're the victim. He would train these people how to go into a court and stand up for their own rights, if you will. Did a marvelous job. The other person, a woman named Liz Lowy, who was the prosecutor in the case against Brooke Astor's son, that case that Meredith mentioned before. This was a fascinating case that goes back probably 10 years now at least, where the grandson of Brooke Astor herself was 101 years old at the time, went to court and filed a case charging his father and his father's lawyer with financial elder abuse of Brooke Astor. And, it made all the papers because the Astor family has a big name in New York, a long time history in the country. And when the case went to trial, it was on the front page of most New York papers, including the New York Times, which served to provide a fabulous education to people about financial elder abuse. What did it consist of? Who could be impacted by it? And what Liz did was not only prosecute the case, but contributed to the knowledge base of the general public about the issue of elder abuse. So we can do more. There are good examples. There's another good example in Seattle. There's a great prosecutor out there who's done great work over the years. So, but we're going to continue to advocate for that to be part of an elder justice strategy going forward.
It's fantastic to know you're at work and to have this information to share. We have a couple of comments and a couple more questions. Douglas commented about the statement that having some consistency in how we define the age of an older person would be very helpful. Andrea commented that it's all, when we were talking about the different ages and different counties for different things, different standards, she says it's all too complicated for anyone to understand, let alone older people. We also have a couple of questions piling up here. Catherine asks, do you have lists of state, local level organizations that coordinate fighting elder justice abuse and work, elder abuse and work for elder justice?
So I see Rebecca just popped the website I was going to recommend in the chat. The National Center on Elder Abuse has state resources. We don't personally keep a list just because there's a lot of efforts. If you Google things like, there is the Department of Justice on that justice.gov/elder-justice site on the handout. They do, for example, track multidisciplinary teams, the teams of folks who work together in the community. There's also networks of state elder justice coalitions that, have come together to participate in elder justice efforts. I highly encourage, honestly, just to Google. Like, it's really, it's amazing what is out there that hasn't made it to the government yet.
It is.
A lot of this stuff ends up being organic in nature. What you find is that you've got people already involved in aging services. You've got people who are involved in faith-based, and they find ways to come together, like we said, these multidisciplinary teams. That's actually, the Justice Department is doing the country a big favor by compiling information on these teams, how they're formed, but more importantly, how do you access them? How do you join if you live in that area? So that's a very important step that we should be doing more of, frankly.
Chris asks a question that I bet a lot of us can relate to. She says, my 76-year-old father is always showing me the potential spam calls he gets, which he never answers. But since his phone sort of blocks the call, is there anything else he can do? Is there an organization he can share those numbers with? Or is it just recognizing that the calls are not valid good enough? I also will add an addendum to this. Scamming is illegal no matter who you're scamming. Is there an extra layer of legal protections or penalties when you are preying on an older person?
So to answer the first part of the question, I'm going to paste a link into the chat. So the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, has some great guides on what to do in this instance. It's really tough in a lot of cases to report, phone numbers just, in general, because of spoofing, which is not technically illegal, but, it is in some instances. We had a whole webinar about that, excuse me, a few years ago. And it was very interesting. There's a lot of bubbling up legislation in that space. Also, the Senate Aging Committee takes reports on scams, but frankly, having that knowledge that you shouldn't answer the phone when it says potential scam or when it's a number you don't recognize is the most important part. That is the way, that is what people should keep in mind.
The last part in particular, having the ability to see who the caller is so that you can make that step to block it or hang up or not answer it is critical, and phones these days, I mean, landlines are starting to become our, ancient history, but you can still build into any phone that you have that capacity to block those kinds of calls. And they're getting so sophisticated now that, they'll even silence the call for you. I just got a new iPhone. I just got a phone over the holidays, and not only does it identify it as a spam, but it says silences the call, so you never have to hear it come in. So, technology is improving, but common sense is still got to be the most important thing. And for those of you who maybe like to question her and have parents who are older, the other thing you got to look to is talk with them about the mail that comes to them, the direct mail that comes to them. I went through this with my own late father. When I started taking more responsibility for his affairs at his suggestion, I was astounded by what he would get in the mail and what he'd respond to. And it's whether it's too good to be, if it's too good to be true, then it is. Or if somebody begins with a threatening thing like your Social Security is in trouble, give us $25 and it'll keep you. So, just, these are things that we should just be cognizant of and try our best to protect our older relatives from being victimized.
Yeah, and then on the follow-up part of that question, I would say it it depends on if it's state or federal law, et cetera. It's really picky, but yes, in some cases there are enhanced penalties if the victim of a fraud or scam is an older adult or a person with disabilities. So that varies widely, but it is the thing.
And I wouldn't be surprised if the Department of Justice website may have information.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing the sheer number of things that my parents have gotten through the years. And the discouraging part of that is that there's only so many, because obviously that's the key to success for the scammers. It must be working on some smaller degree that pays off well, and that's so upsetting. We've got a comment from Catherine. She says, refunding police with different priorities and a more accurate name for the proposals could be very beneficial to the needs being discussed. And Douglas is asking, is there a difference between a call showing spam versus scam? I don't know that they identify scam. I think spam is usually what shows up on the warning.
Unknown number can be another reference you can get when you see a call come in. So I think call not recognized is another thing that shows up sometimes. A lot of it depends on the phone you have and the service that you have. But
sometimes it shows up as your own phone number. Do not answer those.
Right. And the other thing too, keep in mind that it's usually the first three, after you get past your area code, the first 3 digits of your phone. At some point, if you make a phone call, somehow or another, those 3 digits get out there, and you'll start to see a series of calls that come in with your same 3 numbers at the start. Just because it looks familiar, still don't answer it, because it's again, this is how they start. They somehow am able to infiltrate and get access to certain numbers and start using them to call people in that same zone, the same area. So
if it's important, they will leave a voicemail. Trust me.
Yeah, and we sometimes, because we're in this business that we're in, and sometimes we cooperate with our friends in the Senate Aging Committee. Sometimes I do, for example, if I see something from the Social Security Administration, right? No, the federal government never calls you. Okay, let's start that.
Yeah.
And so when I remember one time I got one of those calls, and it was really a nasty, threatening voice, right? And I called him back, and the idiot was dumb enough to answer the phone. And I said, good, I got your number now. We're reporting you. And they were apprehended. So, but don't do that. Don't tell all your older relatives to do that.
No, please don't.
Yes, right.
I just had to do it for my own benefit here.
We have a question from Catherine, and I hope the answer to this is that after today's webinar, yes, but the question is, are there any information outreach programs taking place in libraries, virtual or in person?
I think in some places. I know that, I've heard of that happening. It should be happening more, as you said. It absolutely is a thing that I'm hoping that folks take this information back to use. There's especially libraries that are offering things like technology training for older adults, that this should absolutely be part of that. And it's also, another thing you might think about doing is partnering with your local area agency on aging, or your, like county office on aging, whatever you have in your area, because they also deal with this on a daily basis and probably have handouts and resources that you can use.
Right, and if you go to the elder care locator, we can put that.
Yeah, I think it's eldercare.gov.
That's another good resource to identify your local age and aging. And then once you do that, then you might be able to establish that they have an ongoing relationship with their local library. And, it never hurts to see what the American Library Association has to say too. That they may have some things that they're doing that we're not doing.
Absolutely. And I'll put a plug in for NNLM. We have funding for outreach programs. So think of us when you're trying to do something, outside your budget. And we also have some people who are passionate about this kind of outreach. So we're always happy to partner, help you find partners, or give some guidance or point you to great people like Meredith and Bob.
Well, Nancy, on that point, we might want to think about the fact that May in this country is traditionally Older Americans Month. It's usually recognized by the president with a proclamation and whatever. That might be a good time to do some specialized outreach and targeting to just on this point to protect older adults during that, when the spotlight will be on them anyway.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Bob. I have written it down. Let's see. We have a couple more coming in here from. Okay.
Nancy, somebody sent something to me privately, so
Yeah.
I sent it to you privately.
Oh, I see. I see.
To read.
See, I'm sorry. Okay, so the question is, does Elder Justice Act reauthorization provide minimum sentencing for convicted scammers? Penalties have been too light over the years.
I wish.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the Elder Justice Act is more focused on social services. It's not, it doesn't have DOJ involvement. There's not a lot of, part of the issue is that the committees don't have jurisdiction on that. So they didn't include that in their bill. But there's other legislation always pending, and that is something that you might seriously consider talking to your congressperson or senator about if you feel very strongly on it, because they may be able to help on that front as far as getting legislation in the proper committee that would do that.
Or if either of your House or Senate members are on the Judiciary Committee, the House or the Senate, that's even more germane to getting them to put a bill in on that front. And but you're right, it should be. But I think the bills that we talked about, kind of move us in that general direction. Particularly the Elder Abuse Prevention and Prosecution Act of 20 whatever year it was.
I think it was 2017.
2017. But that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
And Kevin has said, speaking as a librarian, at least in my state, we do have scam programs that we do in concert with local police, local associations like Triad, and our own programs, Eldering, Tech Talk, FICA, etc. That's fantastic, Kevin.
Yes, Kevin. Triad operates in many parts of the country, and they're a wonderful organization. And if you're not familiar with them, you might want to look into them. That they may be a great group to do a partnership with. And I would encourage people to do like Kevin did. Thank you for that, Kevin.
Sharada is asking, do you have any recommendations for social media scammer catfish or advice?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think my biggest recommendation would be treat it the same way that you would treat mail or phone calls. If you don't know the person, you shouldn't be messaging them. If it's someone, yeah, don't engage. Eh, if it's someone that you think you know in real life, like a catfish, my own father-in-law just had someone impersonate his Facebook profile and try to friend everybody, and then try to send them spam links. That's pretty common. And if you're getting a friend request from someone you're already a friend with, you should verify with them, like personally, that it's them. If you're talking about romance scams, those kind of catfishing, that's a little harder, and also might be a good time to get some outside eyes on what's going on. Ask someone, does this smell right to you?
Yes, and social media is interesting too. A long story made very, very short is I do know a grandparent who was preyed on because her grandson was posting on his social media, and he would do little shout outs at her, and she had a very unique name. They called her Mamere. And anyway, and then he posted that he's going to Mexico. And
Oh,
sure
no.
enough, they got a phone call with someone pretending to be him, muffled, and depending to be in fear, sharing some very personal information and calling her by the right name. And they ilked her out of several $1,000s before they. Well, I think eventually the grandson called, and they were like, "Are you okay?" And he's saying, "What? I'm having a blast."
That's one of the more
Yeah,
personal scams out there.
Yeah, keep your privacy settings on. Check your privacy settings
Yep.
and those of your family members. That's a great reminder.
Yeah. So we don't want to go around paranoid, but we sure want to be protected and protect those that we love. So that's some measure of care there. I think we have covered questions in the box. I'll do a little closing here, and if any more appear, we can grab them. But I just want to thank you so much, Meredith and Bob, for presenting for us. That's such important information, and it's just fantastic to have you with us today. So thank you. And thank you, everyone, for attending. It's such an important topic. Please take this good work and information forward into your communities. I did want to share, I did see Douglas said he works as a law specialist in a library, and he'll be looking into starting such a program that was mentioned with Triad. So that's encouraging. And I hope a lot of you take this forward. As you'll see on this slide, for those of you who want the MLACE credit, the URL is there and the enrollment code. So feel free to apply for that. Again, the slides and handouts are on the webinar series page.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.